Some mornings don't begin with coffee. They begin with consequences. At exactly 7:58 on a gray Manhattan morning, Ethan Walker stepped out of his black Aston Martin, wearing the same tailored charcoal suit he had left home in the previous afternoon. His tie was slightly crooked, the expensive cologne on his collar barely masking the lingering perfume of another woman, and the confident smile on his face belonged to a man who believed the world still revolved around him. The headquarters of Montgomery Capital Group towered above Fifth Avenue, like a monument built for people who never expected to lose. Glass reflected the cloudy sky. Polished marble stretched toward revolving doors guarded by discreet security officers. Employees hurried inside with coffee cups, tablets, and nervous ambition, each one moving just a little faster whenever they saw the company's celebrated executive approaching. Ethan barely acknowledged them. By this time tomorrow, he told himself, the board would finally recognize what he deserved. Promotion was only a formality now. Claire had become too emotional since her pregnancy. 7 months along, she spent more time at home than at the office, leaving difficult decisions to executives like him. That was how power worked. Someone always stepped aside. Someone stronger always stepped in. He walked toward the executive entrance without slowing his pace. The glass doors slid open. The familiar scanner glowed blue. He raised his employee badge. A soft electronic chime answered. Access denied. Ethan frowned. He tried again. The scanner flashed red. Access denied. Several employees instinctively slowed their steps. No one spoke. The silence spread faster than whispers ever could. There must be a mistake, Ethan muttered, forcing a laugh as he pressed the badge against the reader for a third time. The same red light blinked. The same mechanical voice echoed through the quiet lobby. Access denied. A senior security officer approached with measured professionalism. Good morning, Mr. Walker. Finally, someone capable of fixing this ridiculous inconvenience. My badge isn't working. The officer glanced at the tablet in his hand before lifting his eyes again. His expression remained polite, almost apologetic. I'm sorry, sir. A pause. Your executive access was revoked at 7:52 this morning. Ethan blinked. What? Your building credentials have been permanently deactivated. For the first time in years, he felt dozens of eyes resting on him instead of admiring him. Someone stopped pretending to check their phone. Someone else quietly turned away. Nobody smiled. This is absurd, Ethan snapped. Call human resources. Call IT. Call whoever made this mistake. The officer inhaled slowly. Sir, human resources authorized the removal. Another vibration interrupted the moment. Ethan pulled out his phone. One unread email. No subject line. No greeting. Only a company letterhead followed by a single sentence. Effective immediately, your employment with Montgomery Capital Group has been terminated. His heartbeat stumbled. Below the termination notice sat a digital signature. Claire Montgomery. His pregnant wife. Not Claire Walker. Not Mrs. Ethan Walker. Claire Montgomery. Chairwoman. Majority shareholder. Montgomery Capital Group. The bustling lobby seemed to disappear beneath the weight of those words. Only 12 hours earlier, Ethan had been raising champagne beside the woman he thought would replace his wife. Now, before 8 o'clock in the morning, he couldn't even enter the building where he believed he was about to become the most powerful man. And he still had no idea that losing his job was only the smallest thing Claire had planned for him. Every public humiliation begins with a private decision no one else ever sees. 12 hours earlier, Manhattan glittered beneath a velvet sky. Rain had polished the streets into mirrors, reflecting the gold lights of luxury hotels and black SUVs lined outside the Aurelius, an exclusive rooftop lounge where the city's wealthiest executives celebrated deals that ordinary people would never hear about. Inside, crystal glasses chimed softly. A jazz quartet played beneath hanging chandeliers. Conversations floated through the room like expensive perfume. Ethan Walker stood at the center of it all. 37 years old. Handsome. Successful. Admired. Or so he believed. His champagne glass caught the light as he laughed beside Vanessa Blake, a striking blonde marketing consultant whose scarlet dress seemed designed to command every eye in the room. Her manicured fingers rested possessively on Ethan's arm, while photographers captured executives arriving for the private celebration. Smile, Vanessa whispered. Tonight belongs to you. Ethan smiled without hesitation. It already does. He believed tomorrow morning would be even better. For 6 months, rumors had spread through Montgomery Capital Group that a major leadership restructuring was coming. Claire had disappeared from daily operations after her pregnancy became more demanding. Board meetings continued without her. Investors rarely saw her. Executives quietly assumed she had stepped away from real decision-making. Ethan encouraged those assumptions. Carefully, patiently. He had spent months convincing senior managers that he was already running the company. Every successful acquisition, every profitable quarter, every television interview strengthened his image as the obvious future leader. No one questioned him. At least, no one he noticed. Vanessa leaned closer. So, after tomorrow, are we finally done pretending? Ethan glanced around before allowing himself a confident grin. I won't have to pretend anything. And Claire? He shrugged. She'll sign the divorce papers eventually. There was no anger in his voice. Only certainty. As though ending a marriage was another business transaction waiting for approval. Vanessa traced the rim of her champagne glass. I almost feel sorry for her. You shouldn't. Ethan took another sip. Pregnancy changed her. She stopped thinking like an executive. He laughed quietly. Now she spends her days decorating nurseries and reading parenting books. Across the skyline, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the Hudson River. Neither of them noticed. Miles away, inside the quiet penthouse overlooking Central Park, Claire Montgomery sat alone beside floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped in the pale glow of city lights. She wore a simple cream cashmere sweater over her 7-month pregnancy. Her golden hair rested loosely across her shoulders. One hand supported the gentle curve of her belly while the other turned another page of a thick legal binder. The baby kicked softly. Claire smiled. Easy, little one. Her voice was calm. No tears. No shaking hands. No dramatic phone calls. Only silence. A grandfather clock echoed through the living room. 10 o'clock. Her attorney, Margaret Lawson, placed another folder onto the marble coffee table. Everything is ready. Claire looked toward the skyline, where thousands of lights blinked beneath drifting clouds. Has he signed the executive ethics agreement? Margaret nodded. This afternoon. Claire closed the folder. And the board? They've already voted. Another tiny kick. Claire rested both hands across her stomach, breathing slowly as if listening to a secret only her unborn child could hear. Then tomorrow begins exactly as planned. Margaret studied her client for a long moment. Do you want to know where Ethan is tonight? Claire's blue eyes remained fixed on the window. I already know. You hired investigators? Claire gave the faintest smile. I never needed investigators. She tapped the tablet lying quietly beside her. On its dark screen waited a single unopened notification. Executive access revocation. Scheduled for 7:52 a.m. She didn't open it. Not yet. Because some victories weren't meant to be celebrated in advance. They were meant to arrive precisely on time. The most dangerous people never announce their revenge. They simply let everyone believe they are powerless. Claire Montgomery had learned that lesson years before she ever met Ethan Walker. The first kick came just after midnight. Gentle, almost playful. She rested her hand against the curve of her stomach, smiling as the tiny movement rolled beneath her palm like a wave beneath calm water. I know, she whispered. I feel it too. Outside the penthouse windows, Manhattan never slept. Helicopters drifted above the skyline. Yellow taxis crawled through rain-soaked avenues. Somewhere below, strangers hurried home, believing tomorrow would look exactly like today. Claire knew better. Margaret Lawson quietly gathered the remaining legal folders into perfect stacks across the marble table. There is still time to postpone, the attorney said carefully. Claire looked up. Do you think I should? No. Margaret answered almost immediately. I just wanted to make sure the decision was yours, not your anger. Silence settled between them. The fireplace crackled softly. Claire slowly removed her wedding ring and placed it beside a leather portfolio. The tiny sound of gold touching stone echoed louder than either woman expected. I stopped making decisions out of anger months ago. She wasn't lying. Anger had disappeared long before tonight. What remained was clarity. Margaret opened one final document. The board unanimously approved your recommendation. Claire nodded. And the family trust? Transferred exactly as instructed. The executive contracts? Updated. The ethics investigation? Completed. Margaret hesitated before sliding one sealed envelope toward her client. The surveillance report. Claire didn't reach for it. She already knew what was inside. The hotel, the rooftop lounge, the photographs, the timestamps, the woman. She had seen enough weeks ago to understand everything. Proof was no longer for her. Proof was for the board. Another gentle kick interrupted the silence. Claire smiled again. You already have excellent timing. Margaret laughed quietly. I think your child agrees with your strategy. Claire leaned back against the sofa. My grandfather used to tell me something. What was that? He said, if someone betrays your heart once, forgive carefully. If they betray your integrity, walk away. But if they betray both your family and the company thousands of people depend on. She paused. Never let emotion interfere with accountability. Margaret studied the woman sitting before her. Most financial magazines described Claire Montgomery as reclusive. Some investors believed she lacked confidence. Executives whispered that pregnancy had made her weak. None of them had ever attended a Montgomery family board meeting. None of them knew the family had spent 4 generations building an investment empire worth billions before Claire was even born. And almost no one knew the trust controlling Montgomery Capital Group carried only one voting signature. Claire's. She had kept it hidden by choice. Not because she was incapable. Because she wanted one thing money could never buy. A husband who loved her without knowing what she owned. Instead, she discovered a man who loved power more than promises. Her phone vibrated once. An encrypted message appeared from the chairman of the governance committee. Everything is scheduled for 7:52 a.m. Claire typed only 2 words. Proceed quietly. She locked the screen again. No celebration. No triumphant smile. Only another slow breath. Margaret finally asked the question no one else dared to ask. When Ethan realizes who truly owns Montgomery Capital, Claire gazed through the rain-streaked glass toward the glowing skyline. He won't be shocked because I fired him. She gently rubbed her stomach. He'll be shocked because he'll finally understand. Her voice became almost a whisper. That he was never building his own empire. The grandfather clock struck 1. Across the city, Ethan Walker lifted another champagne glass, completely unaware that while he toasted his future, the woman carrying his unborn child had already signed the document that erased him from it forever. The biggest lies are often built on the smallest acts of love. 8 years earlier, Ethan Walker had nothing except ambition. His first office occupied the 2nd floor of an aging brick building in Brooklyn. The elevator worked only when it wanted to. Rain leaked through one corner of the ceiling. 4 employees shared mismatched desks, and every Friday Ethan worried whether there would be enough money to cover payroll. That was the version of Ethan Claire Montgomery fell in love with. Not the tailored executive standing beneath crystal chandeliers. The young entrepreneur who stayed awake until sunrise chasing impossible dreams. He had promised her many things. I'll build something worthy of you. I'll never stop choosing us. I'll make you proud. Claire believed every word. She never corrected him when he assumed her family was merely comfortable. She drove an ordinary sedan. She wore simple clothes. She preferred quiet cafes over exclusive clubs. The Montgomery name opened doors across Wall Street, but she never used it. She wanted a husband, not a fortune hunter. When Ethan's company nearly collapsed during its 2nd year, he spent an entire evening staring at unpaid invoices spread across their kitchen table. We're finished, he whispered. Claire quietly poured him another cup of coffee. No. He looked at her with exhausted eyes. I've called every investor. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Call one more tomorrow. The next morning, an anonymous investment fund wired $25 million into Ethan's struggling business. The documents revealed nothing except the name of a private trust. Ethan called it a miracle. Claire called no one. Months later, another financial crisis arrived. A competitor launched a hostile acquisition. Banks withdrew credit. Again, an unknown institutional investor quietly purchased enough shares to stabilize the company before the market even opened. Ethan celebrated his own leadership. Business magazines praised his instincts. Television hosts admired his resilience. Claire smiled from the audience without correcting a single headline. She preferred watching him succeed over receiving recognition herself. Even after their wedding, she continued protecting him from the shadows. Whenever cash flow tightened, the Montgomery family trust appeared through another investment vehicle. Whenever lenders hesitated, invisible guarantees materialized. Whenever opportunities emerged, confidential introductions somehow found Ethan before anyone else. He never asked why fortune always favored him. Success has a strange way of convincing people they created every opportunity themselves. As years passed, Ethan stopped saying we. His interviews became filled with another word. I built this. I transformed the company. I earned every victory. Claire noticed. She never interrupted. One autumn evening, shortly after learning she was pregnant, she stood alone inside the executive parking garage waiting for Ethan. He never arrived. His assistant eventually called. Mr. Walker had another business dinner. Claire thanked her politely. The restaurant wasn't hosting investors. It was hosting Ethan and Vanessa Blake. Claire discovered that truth without hiring investigators. A charity photographer uploaded hundreds of gala photographs online. In one forgotten corner of a single image, reflected in the polished glass behind the ballroom, Ethan was holding another woman's hand. The world saw an elegant fundraising event. Claire saw the beginning of the end. She enlarged the photograph only once. Then she closed the laptop forever. Not because she lacked evidence. Because evidence changes facts. It never changes character. Standing beside the nursery window later that night, Claire placed one hand over the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. She suddenly understood something her grandfather had warned her about decades earlier. The easiest person to deceive, he had once said, is the one who mistakes borrowed power for earned greatness. For years, Ethan believed he had climbed every step alone. He never realized the staircase itself had been quietly built beneath his feet by the woman he would soon betray. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It simply returns to the person who owned it all along. At 8:17 that same morning, Ethan Walker stood outside Montgomery Capital Group, with his phone still frozen in his hand. Employees continued streaming past him. Some lowered their eyes. Others pretended not to recognize the man whose interviews had once filled financial magazines. No one stopped. No one asked if he was all right. His phone rang. Daniel. Ethan answered immediately. Daniel Pierce had served as chief financial officer for nearly 15 years. If this is some kind of joke, tell security to let me in. Silence answered first. Then came a sentence Ethan never expected to hear. I'm sorry, Ethan. What are you talking about? I can't help you. His voice hardened. You're my CFO. No. Daniel took a slow breath. I work for Montgomery Capital. Ethan frowned. I know that. No. Another pause. I work for the Montgomery family. The words landed with unexpected weight. What does that even mean? Daniel glanced through the boardroom windows several floors above. I thought you knew. Knew what? Everything. Ethan laughed impatiently. I built this company. Daniel closed his eyes. No. You helped grow it. The correction felt almost insulting. What the hell are you talking about? For the past 8 years. Daniel spoke carefully, choosing every word. The majority voting shares have never belonged to the executive team. Ethan's heartbeat slowed. They belong to the Montgomery Family Trust. So the trust owns Montgomery Capital. I know Claire inherited money. Daniel interrupted him. You still don't understand. Another silence. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Claire isn't one of the shareholders. She's the controlling shareholder. Ethan stared across the towering glass building that suddenly looked unfamiliar. Impossible. The trust requires 71% approval for every strategic decision. So, there is only one signature authorized to cast those votes. Ethan swallowed. Claire. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Fragments of forgotten memories suddenly returned. Every acquisition approved without resistance. Every emergency investment that appeared exactly when cash reserves collapsed. Every board meeting where directors quietly waited before voting. Every time Claire calmly said, "Don't worry. It'll work out." He had mistaken confidence for comfort. He never imagined it had been authority. You mean? His voice cracked. I've been reporting to my own wife. Daniel sighed. You've been reporting to the owner. A black sedan entered the underground executive entrance. Every security officer immediately straightened their posture. The gate opened without hesitation. Ethan instinctively looked toward the tinted rear window. The vehicle disappeared below the building. He took a step toward the entrance. Security blocked his path again. I'm expected upstairs. The officer remained respectful. I'm sorry, sir. The chairwoman instructed that today's board session is private. Chairwoman. Not Claire. Not Mrs. Walker. Chairwoman. The title echoed louder than the traffic surrounding Fifth Avenue. Inside the underground garage, Claire stepped gracefully from the sedan, wearing a cream-colored maternity dress beneath a tailored ivory coat. No diamonds. No unnecessary jewelry. Only her wedding ring remained. Assistants greeted her with quiet respect. Board members rose from their conversations the moment she entered the private elevator. No introductions were necessary. No announcements were made. This wasn't the first time they had welcomed the true leader of Montgomery Capital. It was simply the first time Ethan wasn't standing beside her to mistake courtesy for coincidence. As the elevator doors slowly closed, Claire caught her reflection in the polished steel. She rested one hand gently over her unborn child. The other held a slim leather folder containing only a single document. Termination confirmed. She never smiled. Justice, her grandfather once taught her, should never look like revenge. It should look like accountability. And upstairs, waiting beyond the boardroom doors, every person in that company already knew exactly who had the authority to change a man's entire future with one quiet signature. The loudest sound in a boardroom is not an argument. It's the silence that follows the truth. The private elevator doors opened onto the 39th floor with a quiet chime. Claire Montgomery stepped out first. Morning sunlight spilled across polished walnut floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The skyline shimmered beneath drifting clouds, but inside the executive level, every movement was calm, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The directors were already waiting. Some had served the Montgomery family for 3 decades. Others represented institutional investors from London, Singapore, and Zurich. Every one of them stood as Claire entered. "Good morning, Madam Chair." The greeting echoed around the room. Claire acknowledged them with a small nod. "Good morning." No dramatic entrance. No speech. She simply walked to the head of the long mahogany table and placed her leather folder in front of the only chair reserved for the controlling shareholder. Meanwhile, downstairs, Ethan refused to leave. "This is insane." He paced across the marble lobby while dialing every executive he knew. The chief operating officer. No answer. The head of legal. Voicemail. 3 vice presidents. Nothing. Finally, Vanessa Blake answered. "Ethan, you need to come here." "What's wrong?" "They locked me out." She laughed softly. "Very funny." "I'm serious." The laughter disappeared. "What do you mean locked out?" "My badge. My office. Everything." Before she could reply, another notification appeared on Ethan's phone. His corporate email account had been disabled. Seconds later, his company-issued credit card stopped working. Then another message. Company vehicle access revoked. His luxury apartment, leased through Montgomery Capital, would be vacated within 72 hours. One by one, every privilege disappeared. Not with shouting. Not with humiliation. Simply with automated efficiency. Upstairs, Margaret Lawson distributed sealed folders around the boardroom. "No electronic copies exist," she explained. "The documents remain confidential until today's vote concludes." Claire quietly opened her own folder. Inside rested years of evidence arranged with meticulous precision. Financial records, executive contracts, corporate policies, hotel invoices, security logs, photographs. Every page carried a date. Every document told the same story. Not merely infidelity, a breach of fiduciary duty, abuse of executive authority, repeated violations of the ethics agreement Ethan himself had signed. The oldest director adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Montgomery." Claire looked toward him. "You've had legal grounds for dismissal for several months." "Yes." "Why wait?" The room fell silent. Claire answered without emotion. "Because justice requires certainty." She gently rested her hand across her pregnancy. "I wanted every decision to be based on facts. Not assumptions. Not anger. Facts." At that exact moment, the boardroom doors opened once more. Daniel Pierce entered carrying one final sealed envelope. "It's finished." Margaret accepted it. "The revocation?" Daniel nodded. "Every system has been updated." No one celebrated. No applause followed. Corporate governance was never personal. It was procedure. Downstairs, Ethan watched 2 security officers carry a cardboard archive box from the executive elevator. Inside lay framed awards, family photographs, business books. His desk had already been cleared. His office no longer belonged to him. He rushed toward the elevator again. "I have every right to attend today's meeting." The senior officer stepped calmly into his path. "I'm sorry, sir. I was the chief executive officer." The officer lowered his voice. You were. The single word struck harder than any insult. Were. Past tense. Far above the lobby, Claire looked around the boardroom one final time. Every seat was occupied. Every document prepared. Every vote accounted for. Margaret closed the final folder and spoke quietly. Madam Chair, the board is ready. Claire drew one slow breath before lifting her eyes toward the directors. Then let's begin. Across the city, church bells rang the top of the hour. For Ethan Walker, it sounded like the beginning of a battle. For everyone inside that boardroom, it was simply the scheduled start of accountability. Truth has a peculiar habit. It waits until every liar is seated before it enters the room. The boardroom fell completely silent. 21 directors sat around the polished mahogany table, each with a sealed folder resting neatly before them. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled beneath the morning sun, unaware that one of Wall Street's most powerful careers was about to disappear. Claire Montgomery remained standing. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't rehearse a speech. She simply looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes with quiet confidence. Thank you for coming. Her voice was calm enough to soften the tension without weakening it. Margaret Lawson rose beside the projection screen. As corporate counsel for Montgomery Capital Group, today's special session concerns executive governance, fiduciary responsibility, and enforcement of Section 12 of the Executive Ethics Agreement. The oldest director nodded. Proceed. Margaret pressed a remote. The company logo disappeared. A timeline appeared instead. 8 years. Every promotion. Every executive contract. Every amendment. Every signature. One name appeared repeatedly across the documents. Ethan Walker. Another signature appeared beneath nearly every board resolution. Claire Montgomery. For years, Ethan had barely noticed it. He assumed she was signing routine family paperwork. He had never wondered why no strategic decision became official until Claire's signature appeared. Margaret opened the first evidence folder. Mr. Walker accepted the Executive Ethics Agreement on March 14th, 5 years ago. She projected the final page onto the screen. His signature filled the bottom line. Highlighted in gold were only 2 sentences. Executives shall not engage in conduct that materially damages corporate reputation. Violation constitutes immediate grounds for termination at the discretion of the controlling shareholder. The room remained motionless. No one seemed surprised, only prepared. Another document appeared. Expense reports, luxury hotel reservations, private transportation, corporate entertainment accounts. Each payment connected to evenings Ethan had described as client development. Margaret spoke without changing her tone. Independent auditing concluded these expenditures contained false business classifications. The next slide appeared. Security footage timestamps, restaurant reservations, hotel entries. No sensational photographs. No dramatic accusations. Only dates, times, verified locations, facts. Claire finally spoke. I asked that no personal material be presented. Several directors looked toward her. This meeting is not about my marriage. She paused. It is about corporate accountability. The distinction settled heavily across the room. Downstairs, Ethan finally forced his way past the reception desk before another security officer intercepted him outside the executive elevators. I have every legal right to attend that meeting. The officer remained composed. Not today, sir. You don't understand. No, Mr. Walker. His expression stayed respectful. I believe today, everyone finally understands. Back upstairs, Margaret opened the final folder. This concerns ownership. The projection screen changed again. A legal trust structure filled the wall. Montgomery Family Trust. Subsidiaries. Holding companies. Investment partnerships. Voting rights. Every layer ultimately converged toward one name. Claire Elizabeth Montgomery. Controlling shareholder. 71% voting authority. The youngest director smiled faintly. I suppose there will be no more confusion. Claire answered softly. There never was. Only assumptions. For years, Ethan believed he had married the daughter of a wealthy family. He never realized he had married the woman who carried the final authority over every executive appointment inside the company. Margaret closed the presentation. The evidence has been entered into the official record. Claire looked around the boardroom one final time. No one questioned the documents. No one challenged the ownership structure. No one defended Ethan. Because there was nothing left to debate. There remained only one decision. Claire slowly placed her fingertips on the final resolution, resting before every director. Outside, clouds drifted across the skyline, casting brief shadows over the glass towers of Manhattan. Inside the boardroom, 21 hands moved toward their voting folders at exactly the same moment. And somewhere far below, Ethan Walker still believed he had one last chance to save the career that had already slipped beyond his reach. Revenge demands applause. Justice only requires a signature. No one spoke when the voting cards were placed on the table. 21 directors, 21 decisions, one future. Claire Montgomery remained seated at the head of the boardroom, her hands folded gently above the leather folder resting before her. The soft curve of her pregnancy was visible beneath her ivory dress, reminding everyone that she carried not only the future of a billion-dollar company, but also the future of her family. Margaret Lawson broke the silence. According to the bylaws of Montgomery Capital Group, Resolution 47A is now before the board. She looked around the room. The proposed resolution recommends the immediate termination of Ethan Walker as Chief Executive Officer for repeated violations of fiduciary duty, misuse of corporate assets, false expense reporting, and breach of the Executive Ethics Agreement. No emotion, only facts. The chair abstains unless required by the corporate charter. Claire simply nodded. The floor is open. Director Harold Simmons leaned forward first. I've reviewed every document. He closed the evidence folder. The findings are overwhelming. Another director spoke. This decision protects the company. A third quietly added. It also protects our shareholders. Not one person defended Ethan. There was nothing left to defend. Margaret lifted the voting register. All those in favor. One hand. Then another. Another. Within seconds, every director except Claire had raised a voting card. 20. Unanimous. Margaret looked toward Claire. The motion passes. A soft click echoed through the room as she stamped the official resolution. Effective immediately, Ethan Walker was no longer Chief Executive Officer. No applause followed. No celebration. Only silence. Because every person in the room understood that careers ended every day. Character was much harder to rebuild. At that exact moment, the executive elevator opened downstairs. Ethan seized the opportunity before security could react. He stepped inside. 39 floors. The numbers climbed painfully slowly. 5, 9, 15, 23. His pulse matched every mechanical chime. They can't do this. He repeated the sentence until it no longer sounded convincing. The elevator doors opened. He hurried toward the boardroom. The heavy walnut doors stood closed. Inside, Margaret placed one final document before Claire. Madam Chair. The termination order. Claire looked at the paper for several quiet seconds. 8 years. 1 marriage. 1 unborn child. Countless sacrifices. Everything had somehow led to a single page. She uncapped her fountain pen. For the first time all morning, her fingers hesitated. Not because she doubted the decision. Because she remembered the man Ethan used to be. The dreamer in the tiny Brooklyn office. The husband who once promised to build a future together. That man no longer existed. She signed. Claire Elizabeth Montgomery. The ink dried almost instantly. Outside the boardroom, Ethan pushed through the final security checkpoint. I'm going in. 2 officers stepped into his path. The meeting has concluded. It concerns me. The older officer lowered his eyes. No, sir. It concerns the company now. Before Ethan could answer, the boardroom doors slowly opened. One by one, the directors walked past him. None appeared angry. None appeared victorious. Each simply acknowledged Claire with quiet respect. Madam Chair, congratulations. We'll begin implementation immediately. Then Claire finally emerged. She held no stack of evidence. No speech. Only a slim leather folder beneath one arm. For the first time that morning, Ethan and Claire stood face to face. The hallway fell completely silent. Ethan searched her blue eyes for hesitation, for regret, for mercy. He found none. Claire looked at him with calm sadness rather than anger. Then she handed him a single envelope. I hope, she said softly, one day you'll understand that losing this position wasn't the greatest consequence of what you chose. She walked past him without looking back. Only after the elevator doors closed behind her did Ethan open the envelope. Inside rested one page. The signed resolution bearing Claire's elegant signature. And beneath it, in small print, were 4 words that finally shattered the illusion he had spent years believing. Owner's decision. Final and binding. Some people spend their entire lives chasing an empire, only to discover they were standing inside someone else's dream. The elevator doors closed behind Claire Montgomery without a sound. As the car descended through 39 floors of glass and steel, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Not because she had won, because something painful had finally ended. Her hand rested gently over her unborn child. The little heartbeat beneath her palm answered with a soft kick. She smiled for the first time that day. "We're going home." Outside the headquarters, reporters had already begun gathering after rumors of an emergency board meeting spread across Wall Street. Camera flashes bounced across polished marble as executives quietly exited the building, refusing every question. No one mentioned Ethan Walker. No one needed to. Corporate filings would speak for themselves before sunset. Inside the nearly empty executive hallway, Ethan remained frozen where Claire had left him. The envelope was still open in his trembling hands. Owner's decision. Final and binding. He read the words again and again. For years, he had believed success was proof that he deserved everything he possessed. Now every memory returned wearing a different face. The anonymous investor who rescued his company. The impossible bank approvals. The acquisitions that somehow succeeded. The board members who always listened politely before waiting for Claire's opinion. None of it had been luck. None of it had been coincidence. It had been her. Every opportunity. Every rescue. Every silent sacrifice. He suddenly remembered the tiny Brooklyn office where they had eaten cold pizza on overturned cardboard boxes because they couldn't afford furniture. Claire had smiled then exactly the same way she smiled today. The difference was never her. It was him. Downstairs, a young receptionist quietly removed Ethan's name from the executive directory. A maintenance employee replaced the polished brass plate outside the corner office. Within minutes, it looked as though Ethan Walker had never worked there at all. Companies move forward. They always do. Later that afternoon, Claire arrived at a quiet house overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't the largest property owned by the Montgomery family. It was simply the one she loved most. There were no boardrooms, no investors, only trees moving gently in the summer wind. She stepped onto the porch and removed her wedding ring. For several long seconds, she held it in her palm. It represented promises, not possessions. She placed it carefully inside a small wooden box instead of throwing it away. Some chapters deserve dignity even when they end in heartbreak. Inside the nursery, warm sunlight spilled across white walls and a wooden crib waiting for a child who would grow up knowing love before wealth. Claire stood quietly beside the window. "I can't promise you'll inherit an empire," she whispered to the baby. "But I promise you'll never have to earn someone's respect by hiding who you are." Far across Manhattan, Ethan sat alone on a park bench overlooking the river. His expensive suit no longer mattered. Neither did the luxury watch still resting on his wrist. For the first time in many years, there was no meeting to attend. No assistant waiting. No office to return to. Only silence. And inside that silence lived one truth he could no longer escape. He had not lost everything because his wife became powerful. He had lost everything because he failed to recognize the quiet strength of the woman who had believed in him before the world ever did. As the evening sun disappeared beyond the skyline, the lights inside Montgomery Capital Group illuminated once more. Business continued. Employees returned to work. The markets would open again tomorrow. Empires survive when they are built on integrity. People do not. Because in the end, the greatest fortune Claire Montgomery protected was never measured in billions. It was the dignity she refused to let anyone take from her. And some men lose an empire in a single morning, only to realize too late that the most valuable thing they ever owned was the trust of the woman who quietly built their world.